Right, welcome everyone. I'm just getting myself situated here. Going live to talk about going live to talk about blood sugar and how it affects testosterone levels. So, this is a topic that I spend quite a lot of time on with my male clients. I work with a lot of men in my practice, and last week I did a workshop on men and erectile dysfunction and featured a client of mine that I'll call Paul. I'm going to keep talking a little bit about Paul today in terms of what we did to help support his hormone levels, but also get his LDL cholesterol levels back into normal ranges. And with today's workshop, I'm going to be talking about tools that I use in my practice, including a continuous glucose monitor that gives 24/7 data on blood sugar levels. It can be an incredible tool for helping people to not only balance their blood sugar, but also get real time feedback on how diet is impacting your body. And today, I'm going to be talking about why blood sugar matters and what some of the health considerations are when blood sugar becomes dysregulated. Blood sugar driven diseases are becoming more and more common in our society. And one aspect of that people often don't realize the connection to is how significantly blood sugar impacts specifically sex hormones. And again, today I'm going to be talking about men and how blood sugar levels impact testosterone levels. Um, I am Ishbel. This is the Ishbel Well Workshop series. I'd love to hear from you. If y'all want to get in touch, you can get in touch via email. I'm here on social media for this workshop, so you can jump into my bio and contact us from there. So if you have questions, comments, if you have show ideas, topics that you want me to cover in the future, I would be more than happy to do that. I always love hearing from all of you. So let me get myself going here. I'm going to add my office manager so that she can help me moderate things here. And we are going to be off and running. All right. So let's first talk about blood sugar and weight loss. So I have had a lot of clients go through my blood sugar program, and I tell you, it is becoming my most popular program. Again, because I think just having that feedback of what's going on with your body on a day-to-day basis is really, really powerful. So, for instance, the moment that you eat that brownie, you can pull up your phone and start looking at your app, your blood sugar app, and watching how your body is responding to eating that brownie. So it provides us an incredible amount of information. And one of the most common results from doing the blood sugar program for my clients is weight loss. So I want to dig in a little bit to why that is. When we're talking about blood sugar and food, we're talking about carbohydrates. So, what is a carbohydrate? All foods have carbohydrates, fat, protein in them. It's just that some foods have a much higher amount of one of those macronutrients. So, for instance, a piece of chicken has a much higher level of protein in it than, say, a brownie does. And a brownie has a much higher level of carbohydrates in it than it does protein. So when we're trying to balance blood sugar levels, we are going to be shooting for protein rich foods and fat rich foods and trying to reduce consumption of carbohydrates. Now, under that umbrella of carbohydrates, there's a lot of different types of foods, and broccoli is a great source of carbohydrates. A brownie is going to provide a tremendous amount of carbohydrates. When you look at those two different foods on a continuous glucose monitor, you're going to see that the brownie spikes glucose levels astronomically, whereas broccoli doesn't at all. Okay, so who cares What does this mean? Why does it matter? Every time that we eat something that has carbohydrates in it, the pancreas releases insulin to help us store the sugars that we're eating. Most people in the United States are eating way more carbohydrates and sugar than they probably should be. And so, what ends up happening is that their insulin levels are chronically high. What research after research after research study is showing us is that the more often insulin levels are high, the more fat a person is carrying on their bodies. Okay. And as that insulin level goes up and fat storage then continues to increase, interestingly enough, hunger and cravings also increase. So if you find yourself really struggling with cravings, there can be so many reasons for that, including different kinds of gut infections. But one of the things that we see is that the more carbohydrates, the more sugar that people eat, the more they want it. Okay, do I have any sugar addicts out there? Because I used to be one, and I have so much compassion for you if that's you. So, glucose is stored in 3 different places: your liver, your muscle, and fat. Okay, once your body has filled up its liver and its muscle storage, it's going to go into that fat storage mode. Okay, and this is again where we start to see that in order to really lose weight, we have to actually empty out those fat storage capacities, but we also need to bring those insulin levels down. How do you bring insulin levels down? You bring glucose levels down. You stop eating so many carbohydrates. How do you figure out how many carbohydrates you should be eating in a day for your particular physiology? Again, that continuous glucose monitor is such an incredible tool for that. And that's what I use in my blood sugar program. So, for those of you who are just joining, we're talking about testosterone and blood sugar today. So, June is Men's Health Month. I work with a lot of men in my practice, and oftentimes men's hormones are really overlooked in the conversation of hormones. We talk a lot about women's hormones, as we should. Women's hormones are incredibly complicated, and most women are suffering unnecessarily from hormone related symptoms. Having said that, though, there are a lot of men out there who are also suffering. And if there are ladies out there who love your man and you know that he's suffering from, weight gain around his middle that he can't get rid of, he doesn't have any energy, he's lost his motivation, maybe be suffering from sexual dysfunction that can happen frequently, like erectile dysfunction is a common cause of these lower testosterone levels. It can affect your energy, your sleep. Okay, so taking care of men's hormones is important. And one of my goals in my practice is to talk about this topic more often so that men get comfortable about talking about it themselves and so that they can get the help that they need. So, in a 2021 study of over 5,000 people in Canada, what they found is that weight loss is always preceded by insulin decreasing. So, again, today, as we're talking about blood sugar, we're going to be talking about how blood sugar impacts testosterone levels, how it impacts hormones. And fat is a key part of this conversation. So, if you are sitting there tonight listening to this workshop and you know that you're carrying a little bit more fat than you'd like, oftentimes it's right around the middle. Okay. You might be surprised to know that that fat around your middle is actually an estrogen producing organ. Okay. And so, one of our first fundamental steps in helping to bring testosterone levels back into normal range is actually not what most men would think would be the first step. Most men just want to go right into supplementing with testosterone and call it a day. But I'll tell you that frequently when guys do that, they end up having a lot more symptoms. And while it may help with some things, it doesn't help with a lot of the other symptoms that they're having. Okay. So we want to be looking at what's going on with that fat storage. What we know about insulin is that it responds really, really well to us when we don't eat anything. Now, some people are not ready yet for fasting. Okay, you may have heard of something called intermittent fasting. Basically, what that is that you don't eat for certain windows of time. And what we know happens with insulin when we don't eat is that insulin levels start to go down. And again, I really want you to get this equation in your head. When insulin levels go down, fat burning goes up. Okay. And practicing fasting can really help to speed this process up. Now, having said that, some people are not candidates for fasting. I would tell you that a lot of women don't do well with fasting. Uh, I would say that in general, and anytime we make generalizations, we get ourselves in trouble. So please take this with a grain of salt and appreciate that everyone is a little bit different. But frequently, men do really, really well with fasting. And interestingly enough, research also shows that testosterone levels naturally start to come up as men practice fasting. So, why is this? This brings us kind of to the crux of today's workshop of why is it that when insulin levels come down and blood sugar starts to normalize, the testosterone levels start to go back up again. Okay, so that's the research that we're going to dig into today. So this month is Men's Health Month. I'm talking about men's hormones all month long. And last week, I talked about a client of mine. I'll call him Paul. That's not his real name. But Paul came in struggling with erectile dysfunction, fatigue. He was just totally unmotivated, which was really not like him. He was 45 years old. When we tested his hormones, we saw that his testosterone levels were quite low. And in addition to testing his testosterone levels, we also brought in a gut test, which is pretty basic level of care in my practice. And then we also brought in a continuous glucose monitor. And so if you're curious about last week's workshop, please join my newsletter. I always send out the recordings for these workshops after the fact. So in addition to these symptoms that Paul was having, the erectile dysfunction, the fatigue, the lack of motivation, he also had above normal levels of LDL, which is considered the bad cholesterol. Okay? And what we know about cholesterol is that it does work hand in hand again with inflammation and thus with blood sugar irregularities. The more irregular your blood sugar is, the more frequently that your pancreas is being asked to produce insulin, the more often your insulin levels are really high, the more inflamed the body is going to be, and oftentimes the more imbalanced cholesterol levels are. So working on balancing blood sugar is also really beneficial for helping to stabilize cholesterol levels and helping to reduce inflammation. So just briefly, I want to talk about some of the different diagnoses for blood sugar imbalances. I mention this because for some of you, you may already have one of these diagnoses or you're somewhat familiar with them. So you can kind of conceptualize this topic. So there's hypoglycemia, which is essentially blood sugar goes too high and then it drops too low. Frequently, people who have hypoglycemia, they know that there's something going on with their blood sugar. They feel shaky. They have a lack of focus. They don't have very much energy. They need to take a nap. Okay. They can oftentimes feel like after they eat something that has sugar in it, that about an hour or so later, they really don't feel well. Okay. There's insulin resistance, which we're going to be talking about quite a lot today in relationship to testosterone. And insulin resistance is basically where those insulin receptors become fatigued and they're not responding to insulin in the way that they used to. And the reason for this is, again, because there's just been such a chronically high level of glucose in the system for so long that the cells can no longer take up that glucose. It's just been too many carbohydrates for too long. And unfortunately, this is frequently happening with a lot of people. Okay. And one of the more important aspects of this in relationship to testosterone is that insulin resistance, but really blood sugar imbalances overall lead to hormonal imbalances. So, with my client Paul, struggling with erectile dysfunction, struggling with a lot of weight gain around his middle, struggling with high cholesterol levels. And then we get a continuous glucose monitor on board for him, and we start to see that he's very, very sensitive to carbohydrates. Now, I've looked at a lot of data for my clients, and what I can tell you is that there's no uh, specific amount of carbohydrates that everybody should be eating on a daily basis. Okay, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that should be having a half a cup of carbohydrates at every single meal, because I don't know that. You may be one of those people like Paul was, who was incredibly sensitive to carbohydrates. He didn't know that he was. It wasn't until we got this continuous glucose monitor on board that we started to see the correlations between the fatigue that he was feeling and these rapid rises in his glucose levels. Whereas I have some clients, I have a client I was just working with a couple of days ago reviewing her data, and she's not sensitive to carbohydrates at all. I mean, I'm envious of this girl. She can eat a lot of carbohydrates every day and her blood sugar stays really level. Okay, so again, we're all different, which is why the technology that's available to us these days is so incredibly helpful. Specifically for men's hormones, when we have these kinds of blood sugar imbalances on board, so insulin resistance, diabetes is one that is very commonly known by most people. What we know happens there is that those blood sugar imbalances impact the adrenal glands, and the adrenals produce a lot of stress hormones. And specifically for this part of this conversation, the adrenal glands produce cortisol. So as a person's blood sugar is imbalanced or is higher than it should be, the adrenal glands, our stress glands, perceive that as stressful. It is an emergency for the adrenal glands that the blood sugar is imbalanced. So the adrenal glands will work hard to help support the pancreas to help regulate blood sugar levels. That's important to know. And next week, I'm going to be talking about specifically the adrenal glands and how they work for men's health. Such an important part of helping to balance men's hormones is working with those adrenal glands. The problem is, though, is that the more often that the adrenal glands have to get involved with supporting blood sugar, what ends up happening over time is that they get worn out. And frequently, what I will see is that other adrenal hormones like DHEA will begin to decrease. Now, DHEA is a building block for producing testosterone. And commonly, I will see this on a man's hormone panel that not only are their testosterone levels low, but the building blocks of testosterone, the DHEA, okay, progesterone, are also low. And that is perpetuating this low testosterone picture. In addition to kind of these diagnosed blood sugar imbalances, diabetes, insulin resistance, hypoglycemia, there are a whole swath of the population who is pre-diabetic but doesn't even know that they are. And it's really this group of people that start to experience these other hormonal imbalances, they start to just kind of sense that something's not right. Okay. They don't have the energy that they used to have. They're starting to experience weight gain. They're starting to experience some of this sexual dysfunction. So frequently happens for people in their mid 40s. And what I really want to kind of take you by the shoulders and shake you a little bit and say that if you are starting to experience brain fog, if you're having a hard time losing weight, even though you feel like you're quote unquote doing everything right, if you're having a lot of mood swings and there doesn't seem to be any reason for that, and if you're having a lot of headaches, uh, shakiness, okay, pay attention to that. The body is always communicating. The body is always trying to let us know what it needs. And so often we just ignore it. And until it becomes a big issue, right? Until somebody is diagnosed with diabetes, until a man starts suffering from erectile dysfunction, right? Until uh, cholesterol levels are not where they should be. Okay, there are a lot of signs before those things start to happen. Okay. So when we're talking about men's health and specifically talking about testosterone, here is always the most important message that I want to convey. Frequently, the approach for helping men with their hormones is to focus solely on testosterone. And I would argue to you that you're really missing the majority of the picture that is being presented here. So again, with my client Paul, had I just said, "Hey, Paul, here are some really great supplements for supporting testosterone. I know that they work. There's a lot of research behind how these particular supplements help to boost testosterone and thus will help you with your erectile dysfunction, and go on about your life." Okay. We would have missed the whole picture that was going on with him, which was that because his blood sugar levels were imbalanced, he was also struggling with inflammation, which was reflecting itself in his imbalanced cholesterol levels. He would never have lost, at this point, 20 pounds. He still has 10 pounds left to go until we get him to his target weight. There are just so many elements of his health that we would have missed if we had just focused in on that testosterone. And then what I also, again, just really want to drill home here is that frequently what I see for men who are searching for solutions for erectile dysfunction is that when they just jump to that testosterone support, they oftentimes continue to have symptoms. A lot of men don't feel very well on the medications for erectile dysfunction. And again, I would argue it's because we really need to look at the whole person. We really need to look at the whole picture and understand how we got here, understand why those testosterone levels are so low. So where did my notes get off to here? Get myself organized. Okay. I want to share with you just like some interesting research because it's just so simple, right? So what the research shows is this link between lower testosterone levels and the associated symptoms of that going hand in hand with diabetes. So research after research after research study is showing that lowest tertile of free testosterone, those men with the lowest levels of free testosterone, also have a 4-fold increased risk of having diabetes compared to males who have the highest testosterone levels have a much decreased likelihood of developing diabetes. And so here we can see just that pairing of testosterone levels and blood sugar balance being such an important marriage, if you will. So when we're talking about men's hormones, certainly testosterone is at the top of the list. But so commonly what I see is missed in that conversation is estrogen. And frequently, when I run a hormone panel for my male clients, their estrogen levels are outside of lab normal range. Their estrogen levels are too high. Okay. And guys are oftentimes really confused by this of, how is it possible that I'm producing too much estrogen? So there is a process called aromatization, and it actually happens in fat cells. So, when I was talking about how important it is to get rid of that extra fat, part of the reason for that is because it helps so much in regulating estrogen levels. This is true for women as well. And frequently, women who are in menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, they will start to notice that they are carrying extra fat. And that extra fat is actually oftentimes making those menopausal symptoms so much worse. And the same thing happens with men. Okay. So as we reduce those fat cells, we're then reducing this process of aromatization, which is where the body takes testosterone and converts it into estrogen. Okay, thereby driving estrogen levels up and driving testosterone levels down. So when we're trying to answer the question for our guys, how do we help you up your testosterone levels? Yes, we can help to supplement your testosterone levels. But we also want to be decreasing your estrogen levels if they're high. And one of the best ways to do that is to lose some fat around the middle. And as I mentioned earlier, what the research tells us, and I can tell you this is absolutely true of my experience and my practice, is that as we bring insulin levels down, or in other words, as we stabilize glucose, as people start eating less sugar, less processed carbohydrates, what ends up happening in turn is they start to lower their insulin levels, and lowered insulin levels equals increased fat burning. Increased fat burning means weight loss. The less weight and the less fat you have in your body, the less aromatization is happening. Again, aromatization is where the body changes testosterone into estrogen. Okay, so if you're a guy who wants to increase your testosterone levels, one of the bullet points on your to-do list is to lose the fat around your middle. And I'm going to give you some tools about how to do that. I do want to make a note here that even thin men can suffer from aromatization. Okay, so if you're a very lean guy, okay, but maybe don't have a lot of muscle tone to you, this concept still applies, right? Or can apply depending on your hormone panel. I should make that really clear. Okay, so I mentioned this a bit earlier, and I want to touch on this a little bit more. And I'm going to be talking about this a lot in next week's workshop, where I'll be talking about men's hormones, specifically in relationship to the adrenal glands. A lot of people don't realize, understandably so, that the adrenal glands, which are so frequently known as our stress glands, they produce adrenaline, right? So if you're in a scary situation and you've got to run away, God forbid, your adrenals will produce adrenaline to help speed you along. Okay? The problem is that in our modern society, our bodies oftentimes feel like they're under stress 24/7. Okay. They feel stressed when they're in traffic. They feel stressed when they've got an upcoming deadline at work. They feel stressed when they get in a fight with their partner. And what ends up happening is that people are in this chronic stress cycle, and they have nothing built into their lives to help them de-stress, to help break that pattern of chronic stress. So what ends up happening is the adrenal glands are just constantly firing off these hormones to help support that stress response. Over time, the adrenals get worn out and they stop producing those hormones. And what most people don't realize is that one of the hormones that the adrenals produce is called DHEA. And when I'm looking at a hormone panel for a guy, I'm paying attention to DHEA, and frequently it's low. Who cares? Why does that matter? It matters because DHEA is a precursor for testosterone. So again, when we're trying to answer this question of why are testosterone levels low, we need to be looking upstream. We need to be looking at the precursors, the building blocks for testosterone. And these adrenal hormones are a really important part of that puzzle. Now, when a person is constantly stressing their body by imbalanced blood sugar levels, that will then impact the adrenal glands and can drive those DHEA levels low. And it will also drive cortisol levels high. And the higher cortisol levels are, the more frequently people are inflamed and are also carrying extra fat. So let's talk about the tools for helping to balance blood sugar. And I just touched on one of the most important takeaways that you can have with today's workshop: stress relief. Integrating stress relief practices into your daily life is of the utmost importance. Please don't overcomplicate this. 5 minutes of a meditation that you found on YouTube is an excellent start, can actually make a huge difference. And over time, as you just practice that, just keep coming back to it. You might be able to meditate for 7 minutes, and before you know it, you might be meditating for 30 minutes. It's all about coming back to it, finding something that works for you. If you like to exercise, if that helps to give you that sense of relaxation, bring that in to your daily routine. Journaling, taking a bath, talking with somebody that you love. Okay? It's so, so, so important that you figure something out to help you get out of that chronic stress response, to help your body to feel safe so that your adrenal glands can rest for a little bit and not produce so many of those stress hormones. Gut health. Gut health is foundational to hormone balance. I always, always, always start with gut health in my practice. All of my clients know this. We always look at what's going on with your gut first and foremost. Why is that? The liver is incredibly important for helping to balance hormones in general. It's also the detoxifier, especially of estrogen. Okay. And earlier I was talking about, it's not just high testosterone levels that we're concerned about. We're concerned about high estrogen levels as well. So I want to make sure for my male clients in this situation that their digestive system is up for the task of getting rid of hormones after the body is done using it. The gut is ready to detoxify that estrogen. And that goes for the liver as well. Okay, so taking care of the liver and taking care of the gut microbiome means basically that the body gets to take out the trash. Okay, it gets to take out those old hormones that could be recirculated into the body and thus confuse hormone balance all over again. Okay, so we need to be sure we're taking out the trash with gut health. And then, of course, there's diet. I've already touched on this quite a lot in this workshop. Very simple. Take a look at the foods that you're eating on a daily basis, especially if you're eating packaged foods. Read the nutrition facts and look at the sugars in there. Look at the total carbohydrates. Look at the added sugars. Okay. And if you are eating really high carbohydrate foods, and especially high carbohydrate foods that don't have a lot of fiber in them, those foods are going to be impacting your blood sugar, guaranteed. Okay. I would advise you to take that brownie that you were going to eat and replace it with a piece of fruit. Okay. There are a lot of delicious paleo and keto recipes on the internet that you could switch that brownie out for. So replace the flour in the brownie with almond flour. Okay, that in and of itself is going to help to reduce the impact on your blood sugar. All right, so there's so many switch outs that you can make. Talked a lot today about continuous glucose monitors. Continuous glucose monitors I use in my practice, in my blood sugar balance program, an incredible way to really dial in exactly how many carbohydrates your body can tolerate on a day-to-day basis so that you can regulate your blood sugar and in turn, as we talked about today, help to balance your sex hormones. And especially for men, taking care of blood sugar, changing the diet, improving stress levels is so important to optimizing testosterone levels. And in turn, like with my client Paul, once we put all of these pieces into play, okay, we ran the hormone panel on him. We got the testosterone boosting supplements on board. We ran the gut healing, the gut test for him and identified places in his gut microbiome that were disrupting or contributing to his issues with detoxification, cleared that up. We brought in a continuous glucose monitor and started to stabilize his blood sugar. And through the combination of these different tools and this data, not only was he able to reverse the erectile dysfunction that he was suffering from, his LDL cholesterol levels also came back down into normal levels, which equates to a significant reduction in the inflammation that he was experiencing in his body. Okay, so as I close up today, please keep in mind that if you are a guy who is suffering with erectile dysfunction, if you don't have the energy that you used to have, if you're carrying a lot of weight around your middle, if you're feeling unmotivated, okay, just or depressed even, right? And this hasn't been an issue for you long standing, just pay attention to these symptoms that start to creep in. And I would encourage you to not go for the quick fix because you can miss so much of the big picture. And when you really dig in and start to look at your health and your symptoms from a holistic perspective, you can not only lose the weight, reverse the erectile dysfunction, get your energy back, but really this transforms your life. It changes the way that you feel. It changes how you interact with the people that you love. So I encourage you to take it seriously and to really dive into it. All right. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And if you want to get in touch, feel free to email us. Again, I'm here live on social media, so you could hop on my bio and grab my contact information there. You could also join my newsletter. I will be sharing the recording of this workshop on my newsletter each week. Next week, again, this month is Men's Health Month. And so next week, I will be talking about men's health in relationship to adrenal glands, which I touched on quite a lot today, but we're going to really dive into the mechanics of that quite a lot next week. All right. So thanks again for joining me. Have a lovely night, everyone.